Test, test, test. Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 76. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Around the Lens is a live weekly visual journalism roundtable show that we do every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, like I said, I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Our co-host this week, Zach Roberts, is not on the show, but I have co-host Ron Hamilton. Ron.
That's right. I wanted to let everybody know that you are watching the highest rated roundtable discussion on photojournalism radio show on the internet at this time or any time in the history of radio internet.
Good job, Ron. You really knocked it out of the park. Anyways, if you'd like to follow Around the Lens, you've got a bunch of different options. You've got our website, aroundthelens.com. You can find us on Facebook at AtL Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at Around the Lens. You can find us on Twitter at Around Lens. And I think that's the main stuff. Yeah, that's the most important things. The big thing for us we got to mention before we start the show is this is your last chance to enter the contest to win Where Water is Gold, a book created by one of our panelists, Carl Johnson. It's not only created by him, but the book that you win will be signed by him. So again, we're giving away 3 copies of this book, and all you have to do to enter is 3 things. 1, you have to make sure you're a subscriber to our newsletter. 2, you have to like the Facebook page for Around the Lens and also the Facebook page for Carl Johnson, which is Arc Light Photography Explorations. I will put the link into the show notes. So like his Facebook page as well as our Facebook page. And then all you have to do is write the comment or, answer the question, where would be your dream place to photograph? David, where would be your dream place to photograph?
Somewhere in India that I have not been, probably up in Kashmir.
Kashmir, okay, cool. Yeah, so do those 3 things and you are entered in the window contest. I haven't checked out to exactly see how many people have entered, but I think if you enter now, you've got a really good chance to win. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, cough, cough. So don't delay. Don't miss your opportunity. Get this awesome copy of this awesome book. Take literally 2 minutes of your time and you're entered to win the competition. All right. Our panelist this week is David Wells. David, you've been on the show so many times. We always appreciate having you here. Please quickly tell the audience who you are.
David Wells, Providence, Rhode Island, former magazine photographer, prior to that newspaper photographer, currently doing documentary filmmaking.
Great. Glad to have you on. Anything new since the last time we had you on?
Just
anything major happenings?
My business just shifts by the week to the filmmaking side. I'm doing less and less paying still work. It's quite striking, actually.
Wow. Well, I think that's just the nature of the beast, I mean, video is where it's at. That's right. What people are paying for, I think, from what I hear. So, all right. Ron, anything happening with you since the last time we chit-chatted?
Still in Hawaii, Dave. Still enjoying the good life, buddy.
Good to hear. Don't ever change. All right, guys. Well, let's get on with the show. We got a lot of fun stuff to talk about tonight. Our first topic is more from the journalism side, but, it kind of made me think, how would it apply to us, the visual journalism? So if you hadn't heard, there was a person in Montana that was recently elected to be a congressman. I think his name was Greg Giornte, something like that. Anyways, he body slammed a journalist who was going up to him and asking him questions about, I guess, healthcare and some other issues that are, relevant to the GOP. And, I thought to myself, that's not right. And, he admitted he was wrong and he apologized for it, but he still won the election. Thoughts were, what if I was, a photographer, what if I was, videographer, and I was, filming him and he decided to body slam me with my gear and everything like that. Any thoughts from you all in terms of like, how would you react to this situation? What would you do? Would you do anything differently than what this journalist did? And kind of how do you think sort of this sort of event, what does this mean for our career field in general? David?
Well, obviously it was quite distressing, and if you watch the video and you listen to it, it really seems borderline unprovoked or certainly an over-the-top reaction. If you follow back to the election last year, there was the Christopher Morris incident as well, which actually did involve a photographer, and it was even less aggressive in terms of Christopher Morris wasn't attacking anybody. I mean, the thing that's most distressing for me is that the usual constraints that I would practice when I'm doing some kind of journalism aren't really applying, because this is not about physically getting too close to somebody or maybe stepping over a line. It's about a belief system that we are the enemy. And that's, I mean, let's cut to the chase. That's really what it's about. And if you don't agree with the questioning, there are other ways to address that. I mean, people have been saying no comment for as long as there's been press, or blowing by people, or saying, you know, obscene things into microphones to piss off reporters, but they've never been body slamming him. And it's a decision about the larger political climate. And so I fear that all the lessons that I've, helped me survive the last 40 years kind of don't count anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of disturbing, really, that this is sort of acceptable now, that the press has been so demonized that to take down a member of the press, to attack them, because in his original sort of story that, you know, he was part of the liberal media, so that somehow made it justified. It's kind of sad, and sort of I don't know what we're going to have to do, you know, as journalists in the future to, I guess, ourselves while still trying to do our jobs. Ron, have you seen anything like this, or what are your thoughts on this issue?
No, this is a new one on me. The last time I remember something happening similar to this was a young lady was pushed aside at a Trump rally, and she faked an injury. I remember that one. That she faked an injury, and Dave said that you saw a video about this one. I only saw the audio. I didn't see a video of this recent body slamming.
No video as far as I know, just the audio.
Okay, no, I mean, David Wells had said.
Video, but there's video of the different people describing what happened.
Oh, I see. Okay, yes,
again,
sir. Okay.
To me, the point is that there were so many people, because one of the things you get into is the he said, she said, but there's a number of people who witnessed it. So we've moved from the did it happen to the yes, it happened, what's the problem? Which is good. I mean, at least it's clear.
Right. No, exactly. No, I'm in full agreement. It's just the only thing I was saying is that because there have been incidents in the past where people have faked an injury, and that we don't have a video, we have eyewitness accounts. But then you get into the question of, oh, well, are they sticking together, something like that. I've heard conservatives talking about it being that, oh, we don't know because there's no video. And that's unfortunate because it sounds to me a cut and dried situation of what exactly said had happened is what happened. How do we go beyond that? Well, we prosecute as if any other assault had taken place. The guy assaulted the reporter. He needs to be prosecuted for assault.
I mean, of course, I agree that he needs to be prosecuted for assault, but I fear that it's the larger climate that we're trying to address. And I'm not convinced that we have any other role other than kind of doing our job. And I don't mean to be saying we can't do anything, but when you posted that question on the list of things to talk about tonight, I just was recently, I live in Rhode Island, which is this very funny, sort of small, in some ways, very small scale community. And I was doing a video the other day of a woman who was going in for breast cancer surgery. And I walked into the hospital and I followed her up to the check-in desk, and I followed her every step of the way. I kept waiting for somebody to throw up the HIPAA flags, you know, the you can't be here flags. And the only flag that people threw up over and over was make sure you close the curtains in the individual room you're in. And I mention that because the default in this country, I still believe, is people would like to have their stories told. They want to hear these stories. So to me, this is, I mean, of course the guy should be prosecuted, but it's that larger climate that has me much more frustrated, because I kept waiting for somebody to say, you can't go any further. And I just said, but I'm with them. Yeah, I'll close the curtains. Everything's fine. And so the default, I think that people's default is, yeah, let's have this conversation. Let's have this dialogue. And so how we fix that, I'm listening, guys, believe me.
But your microphone is rubbing against your jacket a little bit when you talk, just FYI.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would, you know, if I were a journalist and I was, I'm sorry, Gian Forte,
John Forte.
after he had won, I would not let it affect the way I did my job. You know, I would probably want to be as dedicated, as aggressive as I would normally be. I would hope that no journalist is necessarily afraid of him or backing down because of what he did. And if anything, it should redouble their efforts, because I mean, if he's going to blow up at one journalist asking him relevant questions about his party's actions, then, you know, I mean, now, especially that he's a representative of the, electorate, and he's been elected to represent folks. I mean, you just be 10 times harder, I mean, don't let up whatsoever. And if he decides to freak out, and who knows, I mean, starting with body slamming, what's next? Is he going to whip out a gun and shoot somebody for asking him challenging questions? I mean, I don't know, but, I would definitely push him to the limit and see where he goes, see what is his what are his buttons? Because, I mean, if you can't handle simple questions, I mean, how do you plan to be a representative of the people,
Yeah, this could turn into a nice payday for somebody at some point, huh?
Maybe. I mean, the other question, which I think we haven't brought up, is that the journalist was British from The Guardian. And I mentioned that because I also wonder how much sort of a xenophobia those people far away, liberal media ratcheted up a couple notch, because you can blame it on the liberal Brits, was that in the congressman, now elected congressman's pushing decision, would he have treated a local journalist the same way? And I don't know the answer.
Well, I mean, I know he was working for The Guardian, but the guy himself didn't sound British to me. In the audio.
Okay, but he was a representative of The Guardian, and you do hear the congressman referencing
The Guardian.
The Guardian.
Yeah.
As a British.
Well, he definitely sees The Guardian as the liberal media.
Right.
So,
right. So that just ratchets it up to me. The question I'd be curious about is if he might do the same thing with locals. And the other thing, which I know nothing about the electoral system, but apparently in Montana, there's a huge early voting. And so the majority of people in Montana voted before this happened. So we don't know. Yeah. I don't imagine they do redos based on body slamming journalists, but
no. It's basically he's elected and that's it. And yeah, I mean, ultimately that's what the biggest thing was. This body slam had no real effect on the election because I think 2/3 of the people electorate had already voted. So it was, he may have to do some time, but I doubt he's going to actually have to do prison time. He may have to do some community service, which is funny for an elected official to have to do community service. Right. Yeah, I doubt he'll see a day in jail because it's a misdemeanor felony from what I heard, because he didn't break any bones or there was no crazy stuff like that. It's just broken glasses. And the thing about assault, by the way, if you ever are thinking about suing anyone for assault, like if you get assaulted and you think like, oh man, I'm taking this guy down, like unless you can show, like unless you have physical, like black eye, bloody nose, broken teeth, broken bones are sticking out of your body, unless you can show like that, if you were shoved by somebody or pushed or whatever, good luck taking that to court, because that's a really tough case to win unless you got maybe somebody else who is documenting at the same time, which, I gotta say, journalists, in this case, stick together. And it was good to see the Fox News journalists backing up the reporter and kind of saying like, hey, no, this guy was like really badly assaulted. So thank you for other journalists for sticking up for him. It's always nice. And that's the biggest thing. If you're going to be at a major event, hopefully have somebody getting your back and filming you as someone else roughs you up, looking out for you. And that's sort of like, thankfully we do that for each other almost out of habit, because we're constantly focused on trying to find whatever's going on, the action. And sometimes we're involved in the action, but.
Yeah. When you listed this on the list of topics, the other thing I thought about was, as a political tool, I mean, I go back to photographing Reagan in 1980 in the beginning of the real art of the photo op, and Ed Meese and all those people really planning the way shots were set up to create a narrative, especially with photographers. And the funny thing, of course, is that this politician had an opportunity to very simply create a narrative, and it's much more effective than beating somebody up. And back in the day, again, Reagan and those people and everybody since then had mastered that. But it seems almost like that narrative control, I don't know if it doesn't matter because we're the enemy or what. I mean, to me, the more important questions are the larger ones. And I think, unfortunately, that are outside of our purview, but I do agree with you about the Fox people. I thought that was interesting. In fact, would this guy body slam somebody from Fox or not? Probably not, one would guess.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, you know, it's like, I think if you have the cachet amongst the politicians, sort of to be on their side, you know, I think even your responsibility even is that much more than, say, somebody from like the New York Times or something. If, you know, if I was a journalist at Fox News right now, I would want to hold, you know, the GOP party twice as much accountable. You know, I would think if I was working for a liberal paper and, you know, or if I, you know, liberal leaning, you know, establishment, and we had a liberal sort of leadership, I mean, I would want to be extra hard on them, you know, because they're like, hey, you need to be backing up what you said you would do, because, like, you know, you are representative of us as well. So I would hope that, you know, there are people at the more conservative institutions that feel that way, as opposed to saying, like, let's just give everybody a pass on the conservative side because yada, 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 you know. But then again, you see what's being reported and what's being talked about on, you know, Fox News and stuff, and how they're trying to downplay every single one of the controversies that's coming up. And you see that's not really happening, at least not amongst everyone. Some people are doing it, some people care, but I don't know. It seems like the greater sort of movement is to downplay any sort of negativity towards the president or anything that's going on with the current Russian investigations and all that stuff. But I'm not going to talk about that. Any other comments on this topic before we move on, guys?
Well, and this would be obviously something for the future, which I'd love to sit in on if you could ever organize it, which is, in my recollection of having done this for so long, have there been, other than the Washington Times, have there been many overtly conservative publications that had staff photographers?
Dallas Morning News.
Yeah, I guess. But if you look at the track record and the big projects the Dallas Morning News did, most of their stuff was down the middle to maybe a little bit right. But I mean, the most right that I've ever seen in my lifetime was the Washington Times, which obviously is now out of business. But if it would able to get some of the people who worked for them on this kind of presentation, I'd love to sit in and say, was there any pressure? Was that why you hired? I don't know, but I mean, because I have friends who worked at the morning news, and, you know, to my impression, at least, maybe, you know, different people, my people would tell it was down the middle, a tiny bit right, but it wasn't like, you know, the Times was Washington.
And not so terribly, I suppose. You're right. Not really horribly to the right, but slightly to the right. Yeah.
So what I'm saying, though, is that as photographers, we sit in this weird zone of how much of that control seeps down to us, where the Times is, at least in my recollection, the one place where they were overtly right-wing. And I'm curious about the people who worked there at one point in time, and all of them have gone on to do other things now, but how many of them are still in the field, and how that experience shaped them, because they might answer a lot of these exact same questions quite differently, or maybe the same, I don't know. But that's a future show for you guys, you to organize. There you
go. Hey, if you worked at the Washington Times, or you know somebody who did, have them reach out to me at David at djmphoto@gmail.com. Let me know. We'll have you on the show. We'll do a special about it. And we'll have David on so he can ask you guys all kinds of questions. All right, so let's go and move on to our next topic this evening, and which reminds me again, David, your microphone is still touching your shirt a little bit. I can still hear the scratchiness. But our next topic this evening is actually one that was brought up to us by Ron. This is a Ron original, I guess I should say. Ron, you said, let us document, or how do we document homeless people? So I've documented homeless people in the past, you know, for stories and stuff. Like when I was going to school at Syracuse University, like it seemed almost like a prerequisite that everyone in the photojournalism, visual journalism class had to do a story on homeless people, because, you know, there was a pretty big group of them in the area, and it's just, those are the most captivating stories you're going to find almost anywhere. So you brought this topic up. What do you want to talk about with regard to, you know, documenting homeless people? What have been your experiences? You know, what are some like tips and tricks you would say?
Well, interestingly enough, here in Hawaii, we have we're number one in homeless here in Hawaii. And the reason is there's long been a rumor that other states were sending their homeless people to Hawaii to get rid of them. And we never really believed it until, well, we kind of thought it might be true, until recently, a couple months ago, our own newspaper put out an article saying that Hawaii was sending homeless people a one-way trip back to wherever it is they came from to get rid of them. So I figure,
Wow.
yeah, if that was in our paper, that was in the Honolulu Star Bulletin, and if we're doing it, for sure they're doing it to us.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, you always hear these rumors, but now here's proof that we are doing it. We're sending them back. We're offering them a one-way ticket back.
Why would you want to leave Hawaii though? I mean, if you're going to be homeless anywhere, be homeless in Hawaii.
This is the place. People are so generous here. There's little villages of homeless people around here. There's tent cities that spring up, and I have one person I'm thinking of. But one of my old friends is living there. She was a girl that worked at a certain professional company here in Hawaii, and then times got hard for her. She lost her job. She went downhill. Then last time I heard, she's in the tent city. So it's a big deal here. All of the islands last month, I guess, all of the islands reported a decrease in the homeless population, except for Oahu. Ours is the only only island that went up. All the other islands went down. I don't know if it's because they all came to Hawaii or up to Oahu, or they went back where they came from on that free ticket. I don't know, but we went up. They went down.
So
what do I do? Shooting them. Yeah, shooting them.
Homeless?
I shoot them sometimes, but I try to be sneaky about it.
Ron shoots homeless people.
Right, yeah, I do shoot homeless people.
Do you body slam them too, or just shoot them?
I wouldn't dream of it. One guy threatened to body slam me, though. I was walking by the Alawai Canal, and I had my camera. I had a sneaky setting on my camera to take a photograph every 10 seconds. I was using magic lantern on my Canon camera, and I was kind of walking by, kind of floating my camera by the guy, and he says, "Hey, can I see that camera?" I said, "Sure, buddy. Here, take a look. Here's how you take pictures." And I bond with the guy, and he grabbed it by the lens, and he acted like he's going to throw it into the Alawai Canal, which is pretty much a sewage drain. It's just pretty much what it is. It's not exactly, but pretty much it is. Anyway, I feared for my camera, and he says, "Do you got $1?" I said, "Yeah, give me back my camera. I'll give you $1." So he gave it, and now my camera is making little clicky noises, click, 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 click. The shutter's tripping every 10 seconds the whole time. And I got one beautiful shot of his face magically during this encounter here. And I've never seen him back again.
Imagine the shot you would have gotten if you'd thrown that into the...
Oh, my God. No, thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, the card still would have been fine probably if I could fish it out of the drink. Anyway, I wouldn't want to step foot in that water. A guy got tossed in there a few years ago and died of bacteria. No, flesh-eating bacteria. You could look. That was like 2006. You can Google that one. Alawai Canal flesh-eating bacteria. This guy got beat up, tossed in the river. Yeah.
I'm never gonna Google that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can live with
anything about that.
Anyway, it happened. So that's why I'm sneaky when I take pictures of homeless people. I don't do portraits. Hey, buddy, do you mind if I take a portrait? I don't do that. I'm sneaky. If I see something interesting, I'll take a serendipitous. Anyway, a sneaky picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of my friends here, they actually stop and talk to the people and want to. Hey, buddy, what's your name? Do you mind if I take some pictures of you? I'm going to do a story. Blah blah blah. We haven't done stories on homeless, so I don't. And then for the local press that does stories on homeless, they usually don't show faces, I notice, unless it's a story on a certain person. The local press here for the TV news, they just show like encampments and, maybe feet sticking out of a tent or something. They don't show faces.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, so you haven't done any like sort of in-depth photo stories, video stories about homeless then? No,
luckily, like I said, I work for a Filipino TV station and they haven't brought it up, and I'm glad they haven't. We had a story recently where we were doing something about beaches, I can't remember what it was, but a homeless guy thought we were doing a story on homeless and came over and yelled at one of our crew members got yelled at by the homeless guy. And he called me and asked me what to do. I said, get out. Don't get killed because of a story about the beach. You can shoot in a different beach. Don't worry about it. Just find a spot without homeless in it. You'll be all right.
There you go. David, how about you? What's been your experience working with homeless?
Well, I mean, it's funny because what you said about Syracuse University is really true. Because years ago, I taught at Syracuse and I taught at RIT, taught at University of Pennsylvania, and the photojournalism student, almost that's the default go-to story. And it got to the point where my first point was, what can you tell me that's not the same old story about them?
Yeah.
And for most of them, that ended up being a stopping point, which I think was actually a good exercise in terms of getting them to think about why do you photograph homelessness? And so the two stories that I did seriously was years and years ago in San Francisco for the Examiner when I was working there, was a story on a homeless guy who was living out of a shopping cart, had a rabbit on the front, and he was this very distinctive sort of a personality, and he pushed his shopping cart around the Marina District, and a lot of people knew him. And this is even, it's pre-Silicon Valley, but San Francisco is still becoming very, very expensive. So the hook is that, you know, the working poor can't afford housing, which has only gotten exponentially worse now. But I guess when I did this and another project, which I can talk about if you want, both of them involve this idea of meeting somebody and then going back and then meeting them again and eventually taking some pictures and showing them some pictures. And this is the bad old days of when you give people prints and then they become convinced that you're legit and that you're not exploiting them. And then they let you into their lives. And then it's just sort of how much time can you spend with them and how long can you draw the story out. I did a vaguely similar story on a homeless family of 4 living in a school bus in Fort Worth, Texas, amidst the Texas boom and bust economy. And it was largely the same thing about building that relationship and telling the story. But what was more interesting here is a husband, wife, and 4 kids. So it was like it was the whole family, literally. But again, it was that same thing of building relationships and going back and talking to them over time. So because I do long-term only, I don't do a lot of the daily sort of grab one shot thing, which is not to judge that, but that's just not the motif that I do. And homelessness, for better or for worse, like a lot of problems in this country, seems to be just like it's there. And so people don't, you know, I don't feel like there's a lot that's being moving forward on it unless there's some innovative program to try to address it, which is obviously what we really need, is to do something about it.
Right.
One last thing about Hawaii, I would say when I lived and worked in LA and worked for the LA Times, Santa Monica used to claim they had the largest percentage of population. That was also a function of weather and geography because it's contiguous 48 U.S. and then, of course, the social service benefits and the generosity of people. So, you know, Hawaii, Santa Monica, they're both nice places to live. On the other hand, to actually be homeless outside, having spent nights with these guys years ago, it's not a whole lot of fun. So.
Right. Yeah, because essentially, if you're covering the homeless, you're almost homeless yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Or you're sort of simulating that sort of the same thing. It's like, it's not fun. Yeah. You know, my experience was when I was at Syracuse and I was looking for stories, and I don't know what drew me to try and find like a homeless person's story, but you know, we had to find weekly find. We were working on our second semester of our journalism course, and I was looking for a long-term project that I could explore. And here's a little tip for you. If you're looking to find like homeless subjects, if you're looking for that, you know, sort of good story or that good person to potentially find, there's a lot of not necessarily, you don't want to go into like the homeless or the homeless shelter or these places where, you know, you're going to be seen as the outsider and there may be sort of negativity thrown at you. I would go to the places where homeless or people who are maybe more, you know, down on their luck gather, whether that be kind of like the soup kitchen style area or, you know, food pantry, food locations. Those are pretty good because the homeless on their best behavior, because if they're not, they're going to get kicked out. They're not going to get free food. Another thing too is where I met my subject was at a kind of like a rec center sort of place. So for seniors, really like a senior rec center. And I think I was documenting what was going on there as sort of like a thing. And I met him via my time there, and I learned his story, and it was a pretty tragic story. And what made him stand out amongst every other person who's homeless, who lives in the streets, is that he lived underneath an overpass. So if you remember when you were there, David, you know, and maybe, you know, you've got all those interstates around Syracuse, and he was actually in between two interstates, like where they connected or whatever. There's this little crawl space where these 2 homeless guys were living, and they were pretty well set up in there. They had like a little cooker and stuff, and I mean, it was relatively protected from the elements. And you know, after the fact, I'm thinking like, I must have been crazy to do this. But during the time, I thought nothing of the fact that I was essentially going by myself with this homeless guy to his living area, to his like place underneath the interstate, where like if they wanted to attack me and kill me and leave my body, you know, where are they going to find the evidence, right? But it was interesting to get down there. And again, I didn't have any fear at the time. I mean, I was, you know, a Marine, and I was, I didn't have any fear. I was like, I can take anything, anybody. And so, you know, but I could take on 3, 4, 5 homeless people at the same time. Come on, bring them on. There was no fear or anything like that. I think, you know, it was partially driven by the fact that I had an assignment I had to get. And just because I didn't know really, I didn't, you know, I didn't think about it. I never been attacked by any, you know, homeless person and stuff. So I didn't have any fear of homeless people. And ultimately, I mean, probably my, you know, any fear would have been sort of just in my own mind, I think. I don't think, you know, unless they're like violent homeless people, then you have to worry about it. And I think probably if I was a female, I would probably would want someone with me. You know, that would have been a different story. But, you know, as a guy, I didn't really worry about it too much. But, you know, I would say if you're a female or if your person is just, you know, it doesn't hurt, female or male, to have another person with you, especially when you're documenting or you're going into sort of areas where it's like seedy or, you know, a little bit more sketchy. It doesn't hurt to have somebody getting your back while you're shooting. So that's the biggest thing, because you don't want to get robbed. You don't want to get killed. You don't want to get, you know, anything.
Yeah, let me back those. I mean, 2 things you said sort of align with my experience. One is that virtually all 3 situations where I did in-depth homeless stories involved meeting these people first in public spaces. And so getting to the point where they say, come here or there, I felt pretty comfortable. But what you said was the most interesting one, and this really was my case with the homeless family in the school bus in Texas, is I went to a soup kitchen, and a clergy guy says to me, and I don't think he meant it this way, but he basically says, pick a card, any card. What do you want? And he describes, I've got a couple, I've got a guy. One of the couples I'm talking about, the wife is still working and they're living in their car, so they're not great, but they're okay. Or I got a family of 6 with 4 kids living in a school bus. You know, you slap yourself on the side of the head because as a journalist, you think 4 kids, a school bus? So it was exactly that. It was, in fact, a clergy person through a soup kitchen. And it was exactly what you said, which is that it's people who have to behave. And also the clergy person, like so much journalism, is your entry point. He or she, in this case it's a guy, brings you in and introduces you and sort of vouches for you to these other people. And so that was exactly what happened. And that's really sort of a pivotal lesson for people who are listening in who are maybe thinking about doing this. And the question is the access point. Yeah, I wouldn't be going to shelters. I wouldn't be going to places where people are likely to be agitated, because that's going to work against you.
Yeah, and going to the sort of like the fixer, if you will, the clergyman or the location or whatever, you know, you got to understand the homeless person is just as sort of not skeptical, but just as sort of like hesitant about working with you as you are potentially about working with them, in that, you know, they're not necessarily all about publicizing the fact that they're homeless. Right. You know, they live very solitary lives most times, and some of them are ashamed of the fact that they're homeless. So you essentially have to win their trust and prove that, you know, you're not just trying to exploit them as well. So, you know, there's sort of a give and take there with regard to it's both sides, because it's like on our end, you know, we're just looking to get the story, but you also have to understand that these are people, these are humans. You know, maybe they've had a bad run, bad luck, you know, whatnot, but you got to be able to respect the situation that they're in. Sometimes it's of their own doing, sometimes it's of circumstances outside their control. And another thing you have to understand about working with the homeless is that they can be flaky, like really flaky. Like, I mean, the fact that I was able to, you know, set up a time and meet this guy and, you know, go to his location and do this, the one day, I only spent one day with him because after that day, he was pretty much unreachable. Like I worked with a woman who was helping me out at the sort of rec center where they all met, or the senior center. But ultimately what I wanted to capture, I couldn't, which was sort of his overall story as a homeless person. Cause you know, it wasn't just, he lived in over an underpass. You know, he also went to the casinos and he gambled whatever money he could gamble away. I wanted to know like what his family life was like, because he did have family, not, I don't think in the general, you know, local area, but he did have family. I would have loved to have tried to capture that sort of relationship he had with his family over as an overall story, because that's another thing too, is like just because they're homeless, that isn't the story. Millions of people are homeless, not the story. What is the story is, what are they doing besides being homeless? You know, is there a tragic tale that you can somehow illustrate, or is there some sort of like, maybe they're trying to get themselves out of being homeless? You know, there has to be an arc to their story. Their story is not just I'm homeless and I live in a box. It is, you know, something larger than that. And that's, of course, like what you were talking about, David, you know, in terms of asking your students, what is the story here? And then obviously killing about 90% of the homeless story projects, I would imagine.
Right. Well, the other thing which echoes that, if I may, was two things. One is that for a lot of people, in a lot of the stories I've done, long-term stories, it's about being heard. It's about somebody paying attention to them, and it's cathartic. And because if you do live alone and somebody's actually paying attention to you. And then the other one, which is when I did a story in Philadelphia, this was pre-cell phone, and so these people didn't have a phone. So the way that I won them over was they had cats, and so I used to leave cat food for them in cans. And I'd come by every couple of days, leave them a can of cat food and a note and a business card. And I did that for a couple of weeks. And finally, they returned my phone call and called me. And then we started the real dialogue. And so it's all about all the stuff that we do as journalists in terms of relationship building, listening to people, allowing them to share their stories, which is very cathartic for a lot of them. So I think all those things kind of tie together.
Yeah, I agree. Any last thoughts from you, Ron?
You know, just what you're saying about people who are in the situation for whatever reason. It could be their own fault, could be just circumstances. I do remember a homeless family here in Waipahu, Hawaii here, that lived under the bridge, and they owned a home, and they rented it out because they could make more money by renting out their home than they could at jobs paying for their home, and that's why they were homeless. I don't know if they ever wanted me to do a story on them, but that was their story they told me.
So they chose to be homeless so they could get the money from renting out their own house.
Correct. Yes, sir.
That is interesting. I never heard that scenario before.
Well, we have high rents here in Hawaii, and the job pay is, rents are high and job pay is low, right?
Isn't that a reflection of the housing market distortion there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You know, I used to be a real estate agent here before in Hawaii. And
Really?
I'll tell you, oh, yes, sir. I worked for 2 years real estate agent. My license expired, and so did I. I hated it. I had enough.
No.
My boss says, it's time for you to do a continuing education. I said, no, it's not. Time for me to quit. Yeah, the rental market here is driven by two main things. Number one is the military. The military receives a certain amount for allowance for housing. And so a lot of the rents are based on the military ability to pay. And we have a lot of military here on the island. We have all the services here, including the Coast Guard, you know, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. So we have a lot of bases here. We have a lot of military people here. I think it's the second biggest source of income to the islands is military. The first being tourism.
Right.
Wow.
Third is, I think, medical. So the military drives up the price of rentals. The second thing is the social services here is so great. We have a great Section 8 program for low-income people. And Section 8 also allows a lot of money for the rentals. So, of course, all the landlords are basing their rent prices on Section 8 and military prices. So the average guy making $10 an hour, well, he's got to get 3 or 4 friends together to make rent.
Yeah.
That's why we have so many homeless here.
And the weather.
That's one of the reasons.
So,
and the weather.
you know, it's like we were talking about this. Actually, my wife and I were talking about this the other day. You know, it's like, or if I was a single guy, like, what would I do for housing? And I would probably, you know, get a house with like multiple bedrooms and try and rent out all the other bedrooms to my buddies in hopes that hopefully they're paying off the mortgage and I'm just, you know,
right.
That's sort of the ideal thing there. A little pro tip there if you're a single person looking to find a place to live. Get a big place with a bunch of rooms and then get a bunch of people to pay for your rent for you. All right, well, let's go and move on to our last topic this evening. Of course, as always, we like to talk about gear here at Around the Lens. And what other gear do we like besides like 360 cameras? Of course, we love drones. Like every other week, it seems like. But of course, there is a neat development in the world of drones. If you've been living under a rock, I understand that you haven't heard about this. But if you haven't been living under a rock, you've probably heard about this. It's the DJI Spark. It's this $500 drone coming out from, of course, drone manufacturer DJI. That is sort of, I would say, the most consumer-friendly, consumer-level drone that they've ever come out with, since they've been a company. And, just the basic details. I know it shoots 1080p 30, so you're not going to get any 4K content out of it. But the neat things about it is that it has a lot of very, consumer friendly features, like the ability to control the drone with your hand, or, just a lot of pre-configured sort of movements into it. So again, it's not really trying to be more of like your production film tool. You're not going to be using this for necessarily your short film or even your real movie, but it's just something that you're going out to the park with a bunch of friends. You take with you. Again, it's so small. The actual drone portion, the body portion, is smaller than a cell phone. With obviously the propellers propped out is bigger than a cell phone, but the main drone portion is smaller than a cell phone. But something you maybe go to the park, go to the beach, whatever, and you just throw it around and get a few selfies, maybe a few cool shots, and that's about it. It's less of that investment that might come from sort of a larger, even a cheaper, older model drone that maybe is a bit more difficult to drive, or a newer drone that again has more features or is more expensive than is prohibitively expensive, essentially. So, what do you guys think of the DJI Spark? Is this something you want in your sort of camera collection, your camera bag?
Well, you know what this thing would really be great for is if you have to interview your local congressman and you're afraid that you might be injured, you can send the drone in first. Ask the question through the drone.
He body slammed me.
Body slammed the drone. All right. Well, then they have to chase it around, running after it, and you get good video of them chasing the drone, trying to
get over here, you liberal media.
Yeah. I mean, I have only seen what I've seen online. My two questions are: one, has anybody done any serious reviews? Because all of that advertising of how easy it is to control, of course, looks exactly like you said, and it seemed like it's a great price point for exploding the drone market. But has anybody reviewed it and played with it to see if it works as well? And my other question is,
I don't know. I mean, that's a good point you bring up, though. Has anyone ever thought about the exploding drone market? I mean, drones that go around and explode. That's
well, that's not really.
You bring up a good idea there, David. Exploding drones.
There is actually an enormous issue in Iraq and Afghanistan about exploding drones.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
On the military, actually, the U.S. military is real serious, spending serious money trying to figure out how to block people flying in $500 drones or less with small IEDs.
Right.
And I just sort of it's just out there, which leads to my big question about drones. I mean, I read what we all read, but when is that moment going to happen when somebody uses a drone for something? Like, I thought the landing in the White House might have been that moment when it's going to push this into a discussion of like seriously banning them or body slamming all of them or something. That hasn't happened yet. And will it happen? Am I being paranoid? Ron shaking.
Well, there was yeah, no, I'm just saying there was that kid that put a gun on his drone. If you remember that story.
I missed
that.
He
put a gun. Yeah, he put a gun on his drone. Was out there in the woods shooting the gun with his attached to his drone, and he put the video online. And they said, "Well, there's no law against putting a gun on your drone and shooting it in the woods. So, no, we're not going to prosecute the boy, but we might look into legislation in the future."
Okay.
If somebody were to say, put legislation against putting weapons on a drone, then you have all these Second Amendment activists coming up. You're like, don't take away my drone's weapons. Like that,
I guess I was asking more in terms of in our realm of photojournalism and people using them for paparazzi stuff out in California, where I know they've got some regulations, or the great fear of a drone too close to an airport that does something that involves airplanes and dead people, frankly.
Well, we have no-fly zones already for drones. There's certain regulations already.
If you're a drone operator and you fly it in the vicinity of an airport or a heliport or anything where you're not supposed to fly it, and you're caught, obviously there are rules, and you can face, potentially confinement or fines for that, especially if you're operating without a license.
Right, but we all know that people, even though there are rules, people do dumb things all the time. And I guess my question is, this is a potential higher level of dumb thing, which again will spill back on all the drone operators who are, I don't know, innocent, but aren't as dumb as the person who does this dumb thing, like the person who flew it into the White House. I mean, that's still pretty amazing to me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's something that probably, there's, law enforcement has tools that they're using. I mean, there's a million tools out there, and I would be very surprised if all the drone manufacturers aren't being courted by all the law enforcement agencies to build backdoors into their drone infrastructure, so that if law enforcement does see a drone flying unauthorized into an area it shouldn't be, that they can remote in and take that drone down somehow. But then again, even if you have that, you're always going to have the sort of tinkerer market, the hacker market, a drone in their garage, and it doesn't find any sort of requirements. Like I know, at least with the DJIs, like if you want to fly this DJI Spark in an area that is, flying it, that the GPS actually disables your ability to fly.
Yeah, right.
In certain areas where you can't fly using GPS because it's a no-fly zone. But again, that's only a restriction that is limited to people who use sort of commercial off-the-shelf drone options. But even if you do use those options, you can still just fly without GPS capability. You fly by sort of sight. I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be a tipping point at some point. I don't know when that point will be. Right. We'll probably have to have a major sort of terrorist, I guess, attack using drones. And then we'll probably have a huge shift in terms of sort of mindset, sort of popular mindset about, drones and drone operators, to the point where, drone operators, even if they're using it for benign commercial interests, will be seen as sort of like, oh, could they be a terrorist? And then you're going to have this sort of demonization of drone operators, much as like the same way you see a demonization of just people who have DSLR cameras. You see all these ads and these sort of like warnings. If you see somebody with a camera taking pictures of airplanes and stuff, they could beware, even though there are people who like to document airplanes for their hobby or whatever. So, that's where I could see this eventually going.
So it sounds like this is the demonization hour. We have the demonization of the journalist up front. So now we're demonizing drone operators, which obviously I'm against both of those. Yeah. So Rob, are you going to be demonized too, or?
I think so.
Why? That's what we need to do. But let's talk about. Let's talk about this. This is a tool in your toolbox or a tool in your kit. David or Ron, do either of you use drones? Would you consider using this? Is this the drone that sort of like makes you think, okay, it's at a price point that's reasonable enough? It's a tool that I can add to my kit that will contribute to, especially you, David, with all your video productions you're doing. I got to imagine your customers, your clients, or even you yourself are saying this production would be so much more enhanced with just a nice sweeping drone shot, Well, there's a drone establishing shot, right? Yeah,
it's true. And I will look at this and I will wait and see. My experience with buying equipment is I'm going to wait for the first 6 months to see all the bugs get out. And second, to see if the promises are as good as they claim. One of the things I'm working on, just starting, is a project on shellfishing on quahoggers in Narragansett Bay here. And it's one of those things where there's a lot of potential for drone shots in terms of locating it and the boats and going out with these guys. And of course, I've been out with them, but I'm always on the boat at the same level they are. So in theory, of course, most of the paying people I deal with, I think because of the anxiety about the legality, at least in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, they tend to look for specialists. And I don't know how this is going to play in the specialty market, but like, for example, I'm less than 5 miles from a couple of airports. So most of the stuff I'd be doing around here, because of that 5 mile limit, would be a problem. Where if I'm out in Narragansett Bay proper, I don't think it'd be that much of a problem. So I'm certainly looking at it, but I'm kind of waiting to hear the other shoe drop, as it were.
Okay.
Having said that, I've used a couple of the DJI. I used the DJI Osmo a lot last summer, which I really liked. They make great technology, and it's amazing how fast they continue to keep dropping the price points. Right. That's a whole nother thing in this technological downward spiral of prices, is how cheap they can make these things. Because the Osmo is a handheld, gimbal camera, and it was great for the shoot that I was using it on. But this is a whole nother level of upping the technology and dropping the cost.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, for your area, they're not looking for, Joe photographer who happens to operate a drone. They're looking for Joe drone operators services to buy their drone services, right? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So then you would not be the sort of desired person to provide drone service. They want They want the specific drone operator.
Yeah, and they'd ask me to subcontract out to drone operators. I've interacted with a couple. It's never come to the point of actually hiring them and paying them, but most of the people here presume I'm going to hire somebody else to do it, and I, build a piece on top of that if it were to happen.
Yeah.
I have a friend here in Hawaii. She does real estate photography. She takes pictures of houses for sale. Anyway, that's what she does.
Does she use a drone yet?
No, that's what happened is the company that hired her, it's a real estate company. They said, we'll pay you $100, go to the house, take pictures, send it to us, you get $100. And she said something like, well, I heard it was $200. Oh, that's because the other guy has a drone. He takes aerial photographs. So we give him 200. For you, you can get 100.
Yeah, I mean,
you can double your paycheck.
To see if there's anyone, because there are people who want, drone, and I have seriously considered it, but I just haven't gotten around to really pushing it. But of course, you do. If you do want to do in this area, if you want to do it, for your business, you got to have some additional sort of certifications, additional training. But it's not that big a deal. You can do it. You just got to go to Montgomery, Alabama, and go to some school or whatever. It's not a big deal.
Well, the big thing for me,
online.
This is just because I renewed my camera insurance about 2 weeks ago, but I got my camera insurance renewal 2 weeks ago, and in enormous letters it says drones are not covered.
Yeah.
At all. Drones are a completely separate premium, and it looks like drones are going to probably double it. So that's the other factor for me is, and it's interesting because I just haven't read enough about how big a disaster there have been to justify such a premium hike, but I guess they're just building the premiums around the disaster to be. So
yeah. Well, if you're going to be doing drone work, you better get insurance.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Especially the more professional level you go, do not fly a drone without insurance.
Yeah.
Keep on seeing all these horror stories about bikers who do flips because some dude was flying a drone too close or whatever. It's just. Are you going to integrate any drone work? Has your station asked you to integrate drone work into your day-to-day reporting, or is it just not something that they're?
Haven't asked. I don't see them asking. They're happy with the way we do stuff around here as it is. If the competition starts doing it, I suppose that would be a reason for us to do it too. But right now, we don't want to be a trendsetter or anything.
You don't want to be a trendsetter? Really?
I can bring it up in a monthly meeting if you like. I can say, hey, how about drones, guys?
Be like drones or 360 or virtual reality or any of those other cool things.
Yeah, they can buy us all drones. We'll play with drones. Well,
I mean, they're so cheap, I mean, it's as cheap
think about
as
the liability of the company.
GoPro.
No, I'm not going to. Imagine the liability to the company. What are you doing here? Oh, I'm shooting a news story for the Philippines. Oh, we're going to sue the Philippines. Well, they don't have any money. Take your pesos.
No, they're going to sue. They're going to sue Ron Hamilton. What about flying a drone personally? Does it intrigue you at all?
No, it doesn't. Not really. I kind of, we talked about it before. You watch Casey Neistat, and he has such fun with his drone until he crashes it and spends another $1,000 next week.
Well, what's funny is you mentioned that Casey is actually under investigation by the FAA. I don't know if you watched one of his latest episodes, but he mentioned that. Yeah, he's because of all his flying is around New York City and stuff like that. He's under investigation, so he has not been using any drones except for recently when he did a review of and he flew a drone like in New Jersey. It was away from New York City, and it was very low. So, he has to be on his best behavior, I guess, because of all that stuff that's going on. So,
wow,
there you go. Your idol is not using drones.
Well, he's got $35 million. He can afford whatever they toss at him.
He's at $35 million?
No, that's not personal. But he sold his company Beam to CNN.
For $25 million. Yeah.
Oh, 25, whatever it was. 25, 35.
Yeah. What's $10 million, right?
After the first couple, who counts, right?
Yeah.
Please. All right. Well, I mean, I think the DJI Spark is a neat tool. I'm not going to personally buy it. I have the DJI Mavic. I think personally, if you are interested in drone stuff, I would go for the higher end, higher dollar item. I think, the Spark is nice, but it doesn't shoot 4K. It's very limited in terms of what it can really do with regard to its range and battery life. And I would say if you want a cheap drone just to sort of play with the idea of drones, I think there are cheaper drones out there that will just give you sort of that experience. Vice the $500. I mean, I'm sure Ron could recommend half a dozen cheap Chinese drones you could probably get for less than that.
They make little tiny ones that do flips in the air.
Yes.
Probably recommend if you were just curious about drones, there's cheaper options out there. If you really want to get into drone work, invest a little bit more money into something like the Mavic or even the Pro. I mean, it's not that much more money. You're only talking about an extra $500, and I mean, you're getting so much more with regard to range, capability, and if you do want to explore droning as something to do beyond just sort of a casual pastime, you're ahead of the game with regard to your equipment. So that would be my recommendation. But I do think this is neat, and I think this is a great step in terms of making drones a sort of more mainstream item that you're just going to see more and more everywhere you go, especially if you're going out to an area that is drone friendly, that doesn't have like, airports around it. You're just going to see drones. Like, I still don't see them like too often, I think, but I do every so often I'll see them at an event where I'm at. So I am intrigued by what DJI is doing. I look forward to seeing how the subcategory of consumer-friendly drones, expands. Because I know the next step is going to be the DJI Spark 4K, which will shoot 4K footage. In which case, I might be actually looking at something like that in the future as sort of a backup drone. Because it can do the major stuff. It's just that 4K thing is really the only sticking point for me. But if you're talking about something that like this, because I believe it has the same lens as the Mavic, it could be a nice backup drone. And especially if you're losing drones left and right in the water or something, the cheaper they are, the better. So I could just see, and I think at a minimum, you're going to see some of the features that this drone created with regard to sort of the hand movements and the hand detection stuff integrated into the more expensive drone models that come out with DJI, like the DJI Mavic 2 or Phantom 5 or whatever, the Pro 5, whatever comes out. So anyways, though, I wouldn't buy it personally, but if you've never bought a drone before, it might not be a bad way to get started. I think DJI is definitely leading the market with regard to consumer-friendly stuff. But that's pretty much it for this week's show. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of this episode for me and for us and having this great discussion. David, where can people find out more about you?
At Broad Rock Films, which is in my little lower third right there. It's the film production company that I'm expanding with on my partner. She's more on the production side. I'm more on the video side. And together we're doing short and starting to do longer feature projects as well. Nice.
So this is different from the Wells Point.
The Wells Point is my educational blog, but I'm also, like everybody else in our world, I wear multiple hats. The wellspoint.com is my educational blog. Broad Rock Films is my film site. And then I have davidhwells.com, which is my still site.
All right. Ron, where can people find out more about you? Or should I just tell them to go to aroundthelens.com?
If you want to come by Hawaii and tour some beaches with me, I'm always open for that. Apart from that, check out my Instagram, Ron Photo Hawaii, or tune into my television program in the Philippines if you happen to be in the Philippines. Or you can watch me on the internet, Eagle News Live, I think eaglenewslive.com, something like that. Anyway, Eagle News Philippines, watch me.
And you can find Ron at 555 Deer Hope Lane in Oahu. And I don't know what your address is, but I probably shouldn't know your address just for your sake. Anyways,
secret.
And you can find me at 237-428. You can find me at aroundthelens.com and, of course, personally at djmphoto.com. But, again, go to aroundthelens.com. Make sure to compete for that great book that we're giving away. Again, all you got to do is the three things we mentioned. Again, don't miss your opportunity to potentially win that book. We're giving away 3 copies of the book, so you have a really great opportunity to win. And you still have a few more days before the end of the month to win that. So do not take advantage of that opportunity. All right. Well, that's been episode 76 of Around the Lens. For Ron Hamilton, I am your host, David J. Murphy. Again, this has been Around the Lens, episode 76, and we are out.